You mentioned that this might be rooted in the economic collapse in '08, and there's this weird Marxism going on here. And it was kind of interesting to read that in the book. And obviously it's part of kind of the interlude, which is maybe kind of the underlying fabric or structure about how these things come up. Can you just talk about that idea, that theory?
Yeah, in between doing these main chapters on gay, women, race, and trans, I wanted to flesh some of it out, where it comes from. I'm often asked, particularly by students, young people, and like, where does this come from? And of course, you can trace some of it. Some of it's very hard to trace. Some of it you just got to, keep looking into. But one of the things that's very clear is the Marxist substructure of some of this. It keeps revealing itself in, among other things, the perception that this is all to do with power. See, I think this is a really ugly game we've all got caught in. And it's basically being done on Marxist and post-Marxist terms. The perception that everything in our lives is mainly to do with power. A lot of people imbibe this from Foucault, who, by the way, he's the most cited scholar. If you look at Google Scholar, he's the most cited scholar, Foucault. It's not a small figure. He's cited like 4 times more than Einstein in academic papers. And he's a very brilliant thinker in a way. But he embeds a whole set of really ugly ideas. And one is viewing basically everything, including sexual relations, solely through the lens of power. And I think that power is significant. I think it's interesting, it's important. But if you said to most people, well, what motivates you in your life? How many people would say power? No. Love, family, friendships, forgiveness, God, all sorts of things. Power. Yeah, it's a force. There are a lot of forces in the world. And there's something perverse about seeing everything through this prism. But the Marxist part of it is partly to do with that, and the idea there's a sort of structure in society, which in the old days was the workers at the bottom holding up the structure, and on their shoulders the middle classes, and then up and up and up until you get to the sort of aristocracy and capital. Well, that was the sort of the Marxist understanding of how society was structured, which was a perverse understanding in its own way, for lots of reasons. But there's a version of this that is in the social justice movement, which is that basically the pyramid is differently organized. I mean, you might have gays and black people and people of color and women in various bits, but at the top is capital, and particularly white male elderly capital. And that keeps revealing itself as the version of society that a lot of people believe is our society. It's just that. And therefore you need to bring it down. And this is a sort of form of Marxist interpretation, which I also trace, by the way, that the number of Marxist academics and writers and thinkers who were working on this, I mean, it didn't come from nowhere. They've been working on this in the 1970s and 80s, particularly in the 80s, and 2 thinkers in particular I cite, Laclau and Mouffe, say in the 80s, very explicitly, as the whole appalling communist experiment is finally starting to fall down. I don't know if they realize at that point that it is, but it's running out of steam. They say, basically the working class let us down. The working class didn't do what we thought they were going to do, which of course was one of the glorious problems for the communists, the working class let us down, and therefore we need to find the revolutionary forces in other movements. And these Marxists are saying in the 80s, I quote them, we need to find them in identity movements like sexual minorities, racial minorities. There will be groups of feminists, and so on. And we will use them. Now, the reason why I think this is interesting is because one of the things I think a lot of us have started to notice and become worried about in recent years is the weaponization of identity, the weaponization of it. And I feel that's, to cite the thing I said, I don't make arguments for my identity, but I worry about this with the gay thing. I don't like these things where it looks like gay is being used to batter something else down. I don't like it when I see it with other groups as well. And the one that's clearest with that is trans. See, you can absolutely, there is, and I lay out in my chapter on trans, there is a very plausible set of steps you can take to try to work out where in the trans argument there is something plausible. And all of this is to say people can do what they want, if they're an adult. But just to say, here is a bit that is definitely, there's something there we need to address, there's something we need to think about, and then all the way to whoa. Now, if you work that along, you always find whenever there's somebody who's basically got the revolutionary, communist, Marxist-like interpretation of history in their mind still, they will always go to the furthest bit of the trans one. Always. I mean, AOC in America, in her early weeks in office, does a fundraiser for a British, very controversial group in Britain called Mermaids, which advocates the giving of puberty blockers to children who believe that they are trans. That is very, very controversial. And I'm not at all in favour of it myself, having looked at it and spoken with people who've gone through this. But what business is it of an American congresswoman to encourage the taking of hormones by teenagers in Britain?
So why did she do that? Because that's what...
I think it's like the thing I was describing with the Google search engine. It's an attempt to derange us. It's an attempt to batter down the white, patriarchal, heteronormative society. And it's like, good. We will make you say that the big bearded man with a penis is a woman. We're going to make you do it. And if you fail, we'll call you every name we can think of and we'll try to destroy you. There is no other explanation as to why they don't have the debate at every stage up to then. I say in the book, I owe this observation to my friend Eric Weinstein, that why didn't they start with intersex rights? Intersex, for people who don't follow all of this too closely, is people born with unclear genitalia or genital abnormalities, including in some cases evidence of sexual organs of both sexes. This, by the way, I mean, it's not that common. It's quite a bit more common than I think people realize. The medical profession knew about this always. It was a quiet, it's an embarrassing, tricky thing. Now, somebody born with an intersex condition deserves all of the sympathy imaginable. I mean, it's not going to ruin your life necessarily, but it's a bloody hard place to start. It's definitely suboptimal situation to start your life in. But there was never a movement for these people, you know? The rights campaigners stampeded straight past the intersex people to big bearded man with penis, say it's a woman. And I think that's because they didn't. It's a very counterintuitive thing until you see it. We might assume that people try to get coalitions together to agree with them and then do something productive. Sometimes people don't want a coalition. They just want a battering ram. Get that, smash that. Get the big bearded man with a penis and use it to smash down our enemy.
And that's the weaponization of identity. And they got the biggest weapon.
It's an awkward way of putting it, but yeah.